Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on the start of a Wednesday. Glad you're with us for Second Cup. Hope you're off to a great start. A nicer start today compared to what it has been the last couple of days. And gosh, haven't we been waiting for something like that? So take a look. This is what we're facing today, Thursday and Friday. Gosh, it's going to be a lot nicer for the middle to the end of the week, which is, I think, something a lot of us need.
Wait until you see next week. We are talking possible record temperatures, high 80s, possible 90s. It's going to be hot next week.
You know what? Looking forward to that because after a long winter, look, we need something like that, right? Soak up the sun, get that vitamin D.
Just make sure you've got your air conditioners ready. Autumn had this great, really funny Instagram video. If you don't follow her, go follow her. I think it's Autumn Lewandowski. And she had like the forecast, and then she had the air conditioner like blowing on the forecast. It was super cute.
You're going to need it next week, that's to say the least. You can also follow Aaron with our WKBW app. Every morning at 6 o'clock, he sends out an alert letting you know what the forecast is. It goes right to the palm of your hand using one of these. So make sure you're downloading our WKBW app.
If you follow him on Instagram, you'll probably get a picture every morning too.
Like this. Speaking of cell phones, as you're waking up this morning, and obviously we know that you're likely watching on your cell phone, and we're glad you are, and we want you to be part of the conversation every single morning. Do you ever wonder about your child using a cell phone? I mean, we had this conversation within the last couple of days talking about the governor's crackdown of students and children using social media, what appears in their feed, and what parents are now legally able to do.
And we also talked about that possible smartphone ban in New York State, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, two different things. So that
all from the governor, though.
One part of it and the other part of it. So those are the two things we've been talking about. So I see this video yesterday on Instagram, and I sent it to Ed, and I'm like, we got to talk about this with the Cuppies, because they had this psychologist, the Wall Street Journal video. And this guy was really, really interesting. If you follow me on Instagram, you might have seen I shared it to my story. But he had some really interesting ideas, and I think things that parents might want to know when we talk about smartphone use with students.
Yeah, it's interesting because, while the governor is trying to do one thing, realistically, it shouldn't necessarily need to be law. So here's what he's proposing. He's saying that there shouldn't be any social media before the age of 16. There shouldn't be any phones in high school, no smartphones in high school, phone-free schools, more free play, and more responsibility.
So this is Jonathan Haidt. He's an American social psychologist and an author, and this was a discussion the Wall Street Journal had. So again, no smartphone at all, he says, before you turn 14.
Which I think is smart. I mean, look, how many of us didn't have one of these until we turned 16, 17, 18? I mean, these, again, really came out in 2007 when it was kind of like the boom of the smartphone era and kind of revolutionized everything. Nowadays, kids are growing up. They don't even know anything different.
So even if you give your kid a smartphone at 14 then, which is his recommendation, no social media for 2 more years, he says, because they're still going through puberty.
I think that's difficult to enforce. I think that's an idea that maybe looks good on paper, but is in reality kind of ridiculous because most kids have already had exposure to social media. The one thing that I think that he said was smart, and I'm sure the guy is a genius, but, on paper it looks good. In reality, it's not necessarily the best practice. And Mark, I agree. Parents need to be responsible for what's on their phone. He says, the reason why kids should not have a phone in high school or a smartphone in high school is because then you're forcing them to kind of hide it. And, you're reading a book, but also like talking on your cell phone, texting, whatever. But what the point he made that I thought was most interesting was that 10, 20, 30 years ago, it would be like inviting you to bring your TV, your phone,
your record player,
your tape player, whatever it is, and putting it all on your desk, the teacher giving you an outlet and saying, okay, plug everything in. Like, that's basically what this is. And when you put it into perspective like that, you realize, okay, maybe having one of these things is a little bit over the top.
Okay, Jeanette says, I'm so happy I didn't have a phone growing up.
Right.
To see the evolution of the cell phone age is wild. Linda says, I agree with limited phone use. My grandson's glued to his phone constantly. It is not healthy. They have no social skills.
Elizabeth is right. I mean, half the battle with kids and social media is communication. I have 3 kids, all with phones, but we talk about things they see on various social media sites. And that's kind of the thing, like, right? Like if you're talking to your children and you're able to have these conversations where you're instilling positive communication in your family, then you're able to have that open dialogue.
Well, yeah, one of the things he talked about too is that parents sometimes don't realize what their kids are actually watching on these phones. He mentioned porn, and he mentioned he's seen kids watching it in schools because they have it there. He mentioned like other really graphic, disturbing videos, and like parents might not realize that this somehow gets passed around.
Sherry, I'm glad that you're weighing in here. As a parent of 2 boys, I didn't get them one until high school. How old are your children now? And what was the impact? I mean, so talk about the peer pressure here, because when you are comparing yourself as a child to others, you're quick to say, Katie has a cell phone. Why can't I have a cell phone? Or Katie's parents let her have X, Y, and Z. Why can't you let me have this?
So that was it was funny because I started reading the comments on this because it's like you said, right? Like, parents do have to decide for themselves. These are recommendations, right? From somebody who, has seen a lot and is making these recommendations. But parents still have to decide what they think is right for their family. But one of the things a lot of parents mentioned is, well, what about the peer pressure? And then a lot of parents commented back to them and said, it's your job as a parent to make your kids understand peer pressure doesn't mean you just get what you want.
Right. No, of course. But, parents are quick to buckle to that as well, because it's easier to say, okay, you're right. You don't want your kid to be ostracized for not having something. So you're quick to give in. And, I totally understand that. And I empathize with that because, I was one of those kids. I was like, well, this kid has something. Why can't I have it? Why are you being so strict with me?
What'd your parents say?
I don't even remember, because at the end of the day, I think if I wanted to fit in, they would have done whatever they could have to help me do that. And I think that nowadays, especially with, one of the things he says is that you have to be on your own, right? So like, you got to figure it out. You can't have a helicopter parent the entire time.
No, but it's not a helicopter parent to make a decision about a phone.
No.
It's, that's what works for your family. And these are just, again, the recommendations. Maybe your kid's a little more mature. Maybe you think they can handle it. Maybe you're having the conversations.
So Lawrence says, I don't let Vincenzo on my phone. Tried to have him watch a tablet on the plane ride, and he wanted to play with toys instead. That's great. Good for him. That's basically what they're saying, like independent play with like real tangible things. That goes a long way. Jillian, good morning to you. My son takes his to school. He's got it if he needs it in an emergency, as there aren't payphones in the area. Like when I was younger, I check his phone daily, absolutely no social media. See, and that works for you. That's great.
And I wonder how old Jillian, let us know how old your son is. Do you check your kids' cell phones? I think up to a certain age you have to.
So like Alana has a little flip phone. She's going to be 8, but she texts.
So, and this is the important too to mention, like he was talking only about smartphones. He was like, give your kids a flip phone. If you want to get a hold of them, they want to get a hold of you, give them a flip phone.
Jillian says her son's 11. So there you go.
Like he was saying, it's not the phone, it's the internet. Like, you wouldn't let them sit and go, you'd just be like, go play on the computer. Unmonitored,
Well, look, back in the day, how many of us were doing that though? We all were. Chances are parents weren't necessarily checking in to see what their kids were doing or what games they were playing or who they were chatting with on AOL. We know exactly what's going on because we were part of that generation that was raised by a computer, not a smartphone.
Right.
But, we were sitting downstairs in the basement talking to our friends until God knows when.
But your parents probably knew you were talking to your friends. Like, I do think there was like, there was probably a barrier in your mind. Like, I don't know this person. Should I be allowed to talk to them? Whether or not you did was up to you.
Right. My youngest is special needs, Sarah says, and I can see me getting him a phone earlier than I would think is ideal. And that's kind of my point, right? But that probably means my older kid will want one too. Luckily, I have a few good years left. And then Melly says no payphones is really an issue.
She also says, oops, sorry, I want to pull up the comment, that her son's 13, checks it daily.
Good, then that's smart. And Michelle says the federal government has too much control over the public schools education. Well, and this is, the state governor, the state government creating a law, 2 different laws really, that would regulate what social media companies are able to do with the information that comes from your child without your permission, and then what they're able to do in schools. But already there are some bans in schools where kids are not allowed to have their cell phones, and they're, doing just fine.
Yeah, except for then the teachers still say they take them away every single day, even though they're not allowed
Well,
in
but they
schools.
have the reality is that they're allowed to then.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
oh, absolutely, yeah.
Sarah says such a conflict. Phones in schools are so distracting, but what if there's a real emergency? If there's a real emergency, what they're saying is that you could contact the school via the office or they would contact you. And I get it. Like, you want to be in touch. You want to have that instant communication with your child because that's what happens nowadays, right?
Yeah.
We're so used to getting everything in a snap. Anyway, what I was saying about Alana too, she's going to be 8 and, she texts me and, like I just wanted to text my sister-in-law then and be like, hey, just so you know, Alana is saying X, Y, and Z to me because I don't want her to like not be in the loop.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I feel like that's super important as well.
Naomi bringing up an interesting point. I haven't heard this. Teachers should not be allowed to have them either. I don't know about that one. I don't know. What do you guys think? Jason says Bowen has a tablet. We try to limit his time on it. He's only 3.
Well, and that's smart too. I wonder why teachers should not be able to have a phone. Like, I get it, right? Like, if you're telling the students one thing, why would there be rules for thee but not for me?
Well, because the teacher's an adult.
Yeah, but like,
And
if
the
you're
student
telling
is 12.
yeah, but if you're telling the student not to be on the phone or not to bring the phone into class, why should the teacher be allowed to do the same?
Because the teacher's an adult.
Yeah, but that's not fair. That's
Ed,
setting a
life isn't
no.
fair.
That's setting a terrible example. You cannot say
no teacher will. They shouldn't sit there on their phone. But
or
like,
during the class at all.
no, but they can have their phone.
But how many teachers are doing that?
I don't know.
That's why I'm saying you can't have rules for thee, but not for me. You
So-
can't allow somebody to do something that you're telling somebody else not to do.
You don't. But the teacher needs a phone. If there's an emergency in
The
their
teacher has
classroom,
a desk phone.
the teacher needs a phone.
They have one on their desk.
Okay, Ed.
I'm just saying,
You tell me what your teacher friends would say about that. What if I took your phone away during work?
but that's what. Why should a student be told not to have it in case of an emergency?
I'm with Linda. You should totally set a good example.
Exactly.
But if you're an adult, the school cannot take away your phone. Keep it in your bag. Keep it in your
I'm not
pocket.
saying the phone should be taken away. I'm saying they should put it away. Like, they should not be able to take their phone out if the kids are not allowed to have their phones in class.
I don't know. I'm with you when it says set a good example, but like, that's what it's about.
You have to model the behavior, don't you
honey,
think?
that's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing with you. Stop being so confrontational this morning.
No, I'm
You
not.
are all over the
I'm
place.
just wondering, like, why are we putting something out there and saying this should happen, but this shouldn't?
Sure. Well, how about all those teachers though who like take the cute little videos of their class or use their cell phones for class? How about the teacher that did Wordle with their class?
Great idea. Do it on the
Adorable.
front board.
Okay.
Pull it up on the internet.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
that's what she's doing.
They
She's not
should-
doing it on her phone.
They should have them in the room, I think, but they shouldn't have them out.
Exactly,
Absolutely.
Felice. It's hypocritical.
Yeah, to have them out, but no one's.
Right.
I don't think there's many teachers that are like, you can't have your cell phone. Excuse me, while I'm on Instagram. They're teaching the class.
The teacher is allowed to text in class, but the kid can't. Why? That's my point.
But what teacher is texting in class? Aren't they teaching?
I'm just saying.
I mean, none of us are in a classroom. Do your kids come home and say my teacher was texting all day, or do your kids come home and say they're teaching? I mean, a teacher should be teaching, 100%.
This is what I'm saying, Mary. I remember a phone being on the wall in classrooms in grammar school. Every classroom has a phone nowadays because if there is an emergency, a teacher is literally able to even call a lockdown themselves.
Jeff Baker says you need to calm
I
down.
know. I need to channel my Taylor Swift.
I think it's just having a week.
I'm just ready to go.
You're having a week.
But bottom line is, exactly, Danielle. That's what I'm saying here, right? Like,
See, now that is a thing. We say this to kids. Okay, we can talk about teachers. How about parents?
I agree.
know,
Model the behavior.
If you have dinner out, is your cell phone out? I had a friend who, I know I've told you this before, where they would put the cell phones in a basket at dinner time.
Do it.
Mm-hmm.
Felice, so many teachers are texting during class. Naomi says, my child did turn her teacher in for choosing her cell phone over teaching.
Well, that's disappointing to hear. I don't think I hope that that's not usually the case. Like, let's be real, people.
I think the teachers that we know
Are
are doing the right thing, right? Like, we're not saying that every teacher is doing the wrong thing,
Right.
but I don't think that if we are telling students that they cannot do
Right.
something, that we should just be turning a blind eye to the adults doing the
So
same
how about
thing.
class ends? I've got my 5-minute break. Students are shifting. Can I text?
Absolutely. But if you're sitting
But a
there,
student can't because they can't have their phone in school.
but they're not in front of you. They're not sitting there in the classroom at their desk.
But I'm not advocating that they do that by any means.
No, I'm not either. I'm just saying that it's the reality is what happens.
I don't know. I'm saying teachers
I mean,
are
you're
adults.
hearing it.
Teachers are adults. Yeah, but you're hearing both sides too. Your teachers are adults. You can't. Sure, your workplace can have some rules, but like I guess I'd be interested to hear what are the rules at school. Like, what does a school say? What does the principal say? What do you have to follow?
You think a principal would be okay if your teacher was texting during class?
For the 15th time, I have not said texting during class.
Well, but that's what I'm talking about in particular. We're talking about two different things here. Do you understand what I'm saying? You're saying that it's okay for a student to be in class without their cell phone. I'm saying that a teacher should be modeling the behavior for the school in the class, and that's kind of where I'm saying.
Okay. We're going to let you win this one because
Okay.
I don't know what's going on with you today. Anyways, we can change topics.
Well, I just think it's like ridiculous. That's all. I mean, you can have two different opinions. I'm just saying that it's, if you're telling somebody to do something
We
wrong.
have two different opinions. I do not think a teacher should be texting while they're teaching.
Okay, well, then that's that.
I do think they could have their phone in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. Next subject. Regents or no regents?
Good Lord. Well, whatever you say, I'll pick the opposite, I guess.
Typical. So regents or no regents, we're saying that in New York State, we are changing the way we are handling these exams. And a lot of these exams are, I don't know, standards that children have to meet.
Well, when we were growing up in New York State, you had to take the Regents exams for the most part. I do think there may have been an exception or two, with different learning levels. But yeah, so you had to pass the Regents exam if you wanted your Regents diploma. Now the state's considering something different. So would it be these specific Regents? And everybody had to pass the same test. Remember, across the state, they keep them sealed. You'd have to open them up. Remember, this was a whole big thing. And then they'd be taken out and boom, there it is.
Okay, so what is the viewpoint here? Do we say get rid of the regents or do we say keep them? I say, really, this is a case-by-case basis. And if you feel that your student should not be taking this kind of a standardized testing, then they can opt out. But you can also opt in, which I think is still beneficial because you can still achieve those higher standards.
I guess one thing that you think about is, and I don't know that, like, there were so many schools across, so many states that don't have any. New York is one of 9 states that has this specific exam, okay? So, and by specific exam, I mean, like, exams that you have to pass, right? So it's not a thing across much of the country. And obviously other states are turning out wonderful students as well.
So, Lauren, I know, the chemistry and the regents for math, brutal. Felice, I have a Regents diploma. I think they should be eliminated. Now, what is the option, though, to say, okay, we're holding these students accountable? How do we do that? I wonder. I mean, there are 7 categories.
Testing is supposed to be an evaluation of what you learned.
Right.
Right? So do we count the tests over the years and we say, okay, you tested, you passed, you're fine? Or do we have to have this cumulative test?
Peter, math exams are not brutal. Peter, God bless you for saying that. Catherine, I'm not a fan of standardized tests, but there has to be something to keep expectations high. And that's kind of what I'm thinking here as well. We shouldn't take them away because kids are struggling to pass them if that's the reason we have to solve the problem of them not getting an adequate education. So
Jeanette says, I think I look back at that test anxiety and it could be a good thing. A little anxiety is a good thing, teaches you to work hard, be motivated for something.
And Patty, to my point, yeah, how do we hold the schools accountable? And then Shirley wondering, is this another everyone gets a trophy thing?
Oh, Shirley.
I questioned that yesterday also. I said the same thing.
Yeah. Now, Kim, in the meantime, says she would get rid of them.
Felice says my Regents diploma did nothing for me as for getting into a great college. Now, here's where I'm conflicted, because when you consider the 7 things, and I wonder, do we have that graphic? Here, let me just try and bring this in, because I want to show you what the 7 categories actually, is this not here, John?
I think it was in the BAM.
Okay, well, the graphic was kind of interesting. It showed the different things that we would need to be a well-rounded student. Social emotional learning,
communication skills,
innovative problem solving.
Literacy, I think, was one of them. Literacy in different regards.
Like, I'm not a good test taker because I would study and study and study, and like everything that I would study is not on the test. You know what I mean? How much do you hate that?
Jeanette says the AP exams, which you brought up before, she says get rid of entirely. I would have hated that in high school if the AP exams were gone, because you could take an AP exam
Get college credit.
and get college credit.
But at the same time, though, could you take a college class and also get college credit?
Yeah.
So it's two different things. Like, would you get rid of the AP test and say, okay, like, I'm just going to take the class instead?
I think the AP exam was a way to give the option to take a college class for schools that didn't have a billion resources. So like, you didn't have to shuffle in college professors. You didn't have to like move kids. If they could pass the AP, they could show they're proficient in that first level. Right, exactly, Sarah. And then you could move on to the next. But I think I went into college with like almost at least a full semester done because of APs.
That's what I did too. I had a semester, but I didn't take a single AP test. I took literal college classes in high school.
Yeah, we only had a couple that were offered. So I took the math classes for college, but they were offered ahead of the day, right at like 6:30 or 7 o'clock. But those are the only ones that they actually offered.
Oh no, Christina, I failed the global regions. That doesn't mean I'm unworthy. 1994 graduation, all people to not learn the same and take tests the same. I know.
Well, it kind of also makes me think, and those of us who've been, living in New York State for a long time, over the years, remember they'd have like a bad year of chemistry regents where like a certain amount of people passed and it was really bad. Or like maybe the global regions one year was really, remember they'd have these really tough years and they'd get these stats back.
Here's the graphic that I wanted to show you. Okay, so you got to be a critical thinker, an innovative problem solver, literate across the content areas. You've got to have some cultural competence, social emotional competence. You've got to be an effective communicator. So I wonder what each little part of this actually means. Like cultural competence, what does that entail? And how, I mean, like these are life skills as opposed to like actual learned knowledge. You've got to be literate across the content area. Well, how do we judge that?
So
a critical thinker, like you can be, that's great. You need that skill moving forward.
I don't know. It's interesting. Like you can't, like, you want to see like some results based.
Well, and that's right. Exactly. How do we measure this?
Things? Right. So I want to see how we're choosing to measure these different options. And maybe cultural competence, something like that could be measured through your cumulative history, culture classes. Maybe take different things over the years. I don't know.
I'm trying to find, okay, so here is the press release.
Police thinks that you are saying high school should teach life skills.
Yeah. I mean, and these are them, right?
I think he also thinks we need to have a test in some capacity.
Like we need to measure this. Like you need to say, okay, like if I'm a global citizen, great. But if I'm a critical thinker, how are you measuring that? What is the standard? What is the benchmark?
How do you measure someone's social emotional competence?
Beats me.
That's hard to measure, I think.
And they are moving to one diploma here, is what the state education department is saying. I'm just looking this up here. Under the department's recommendations, district would be required to confer diplomas to all students who satisfy the state's requirements. This approach would eliminate the local diploma.
Like you get your grad, right?
Which I think is like the regent's diploma, the regent's level. The advanced designation diploma would become a seal or endorsement.
So that maybe is the regent's level.
Well, that would be the advanced level still.
So does the regent's level become the advanced level under this concept?
It sounds like what they would do is it would just be one diploma with like a seal or an endorsement now. So they'll be able to add a seal to your diploma and say, okay, congratulations, you passed the regents.
Interesting. Now, I truthfully think when I was in high school, I'm trying to remember if you could choose or not to graduate with regents. Maybe it was Regents Honors. I can't remember. But there was definitely 2 designations in our little thing.
Okay, well, listen to this. Students will continue to be assessed through multiple measures at the local level to demonstrate their learning. They will still take specific state-level assessments required by law to track progress across New York.
Okay, so we're still taking state testing.
Well, and this is federal law is what they're saying, though. So what federal standards are there? We got to go. I'm just realizing.
Have a great day.
Bye.